Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. I'm Kevin Smith. This is where we focus on bringing individuals to you that you may not normally have an opportunity to learn from, to hear from, their journeys through leadership, their journeys through life, and their journeys with Christ. And I'm so pleased today to introduce to you and have as a guest today Coach Shaun Busick, an individual that I met about 3 years ago while working in public education. And Coach Busick, who is a boys basketball coach and has been in public education for more than 30 years as a classroom teacher, and a Coach Busick who was looking for an opportunity to change for himself and his family, and our paths crossed. Coach, it's great to see you again.
It's great to be here, Kevin. We're so excited to what you're doing to help others. And this is what education's about. I think once a teacher, always a teacher, and you're proving that even with your podcast here. It's fantastic you're doing it.
Coach, you're very kind, my friend. And again, it's great to see you, and you're wearing different colors, and we're going to talk more about that here in just a moment. But Coach Busick has been very successful as a coach, as a parent, as a peer, as a friend, and as a child of God, and as an educator throughout his career. Coach, you're teaching back in Southern Indiana now. You've spent time in the central part of the state, northern part of the state, west side of the state, maybe even the east side of the state, but you're back in Southern Indiana. A number of our viewers and listeners may not know much about Coach Busick. Why don't you take a little bit of time and just introduce yourself? Who is Coach Shaun Busick?
I appreciate that. Shaun Busick is first and foremost a follower of Christ, something I came to at the age of 18 years old. I grew up in a good church up in Northwest Indiana, where I'm from, and came to Christ I thought I did at a young age, but really didn't have a relationship. And then when I went off to college, I came to know what an authentic relationship with Jesus was. So that was the start of my journey. And once that happened, my life changed. And I believe that was from the inside out. The Lord worked on my heart. And instead of going into journalism, I ended up going into education. So I switched majors, switched colleges, went to Grace College, where I got my bachelor's degree, graduated in 1990, and embarked on a coaching career, which has now entered on the varsity level 31 years, and a teaching career, which is now in its 33rd year. Feel very blessed. I don't think I've ever worked in these past 33 years. I just feel like it's a calling, and I enjoy going every day. And I've taught everything from high school English to high school PE, middle school English, middle school PE. I've been an elementary reading specialist. And now just recently in June, or actually in May, I was hired to be an elementary PE teacher and the boys basketball coach at Greensburg Community High School, where I currently am right now.
And Greensburg is roughly about an hour or so southeast of Indianapolis, the state capital of Indiana, correct?
Correct. And we're halfway between Indianapolis and Cincinnati on I-74.
Okay, excellent. Coach, you talked a bit at one point you were pursuing journalism. Where did that interest come from to maybe take that first step and consider being a journalist?
I think if I look back, it probably happened around sixth grade. I had a wonderful teacher who my teachers throughout my career through my life have been very influential. And I still have a lot of teachers and mentors today. And my sixth grade English teacher got me really interested in writing, and I became pretty proficient. And when I got to high school, I needed to fill out a schedule with some electives. So my mom had suggested, hey, they have journalism on there. Why don't you take that? I took a journalism class. I ended up being on my high school newspaper staff, and my senior year was editor-in-chief of our high school newspaper, and really enjoyed doing that and thought that would be the way to go. I love sports, played sports my whole life, and I thought maybe I'll be a sports writer. That'll keep me around the game. But like I said, when I came to know Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior as an 18-year-old freshman at Ball State University, majoring actually in sports information, which was under the journalism umbrella, the Lord started changing my priorities. And I actually started doing a little coaching locally at the YMCA. And I just felt a calling to go into education. And writing's great, and we need good journalists. But I really felt that I could have a greater impact in education and teaching and in coaching. And so I fell in love with it. Like I said, transferred to Grace College, still have a journalism minor. I have degrees in English and physical education. And so I've never looked back. I certainly probably have not made as much money going into this field, but to me, I've got the greatest reward, and that is impacting people on a daily basis in a positive way, as my teachers impacted me.
Coach, every time we've spoke, I believe I've asked you the question, has there ever been a moment when you considered leaving education? And your answer has just always been, as you just stated, you've never looked back. You've known from that point of Christ's guidance, as you put it, that this is where you need to be. And the great thing is you've got a spouse who's been in education as long as you have. So you can take those 33 years and almost double those.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's one of my great mentors as well. And anytime, like I said, I've been a varsity boys basketball coach in the state of Indiana for 31 years. And there's not one of us who's coached as long as I have that did not have a great support system behind them. And that includes a wife, children, or a child. In my case, we have one child. But we're blessed as coaches when we have wives, and educators when we have wives who understand our passion. And my wife has the same passion. We both love children, and we both love helping and watching people grow. I have one of my dearest friends in the world who I grew up with, ended up very wealthy, graduated from Purdue, engineering degree, just has been highly successful and has had a great life. He's a great person still, but we talk often, and the amount of money he's made is astounding. But he always says, I would trade you in a heartbeat, because on a daily basis, you get to impact people. So my reward is getting that phone call or getting that text or hearing from former student athletes. And it's not just the athletes. I had a young lady I had in class at one of my stops who literally dropped out of school as a sophomore in high school to pursue a full-time modeling career. And she's been on the cover of Vogue magazine. And when that young lady, she lives out of the country now, but sometimes when she comes back, she'll drop in, say hey, because the impact. And I just feel like education's opened so many doors for me to watch and learn from my students. Quite honestly, I'm going to be teaching elementary PE. I'm going to be teaching kindergartners physical education this year, and I'll guarantee they teach me something. They always do. And that's what I think it also energizes me, because the life in them, the spirit in them, the happiness in them, the joy that I see in these children, it just makes my day. And I think it's kept me young, even though I'm going to turn 56 here real quick. It's kept me young over the years. And it's a great feeling to be in school for the over 50 years now. I've not left school. So maybe I just needed all this. And I think the good Lord knew that.
Well, for full transparency, as we're recording this, tomorrow's actually your birthday. So happy birthday on that piece, Coach.
Well, thank you. I thought at the age of 50, I should start going backwards. But unfortunately, Father Time doesn't allow us to do that. But I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm learning more and more. And I think that's most teachers you speak to. And you were in education for many years. We've got to be lifelong learners. I enjoy learning new things, and I can't wait to learn alongside of my students this year.
That's great to hear. Very positive message and undertone. Thank you, Coach. And Coach, as you're speaking there a moment and sharing how the students and learning from them, regardless of the age or the years along the educational growth pathway, they energize you. You talked about being classroom 33 years, varsity basketball coach 31 years. That in and of itself, back in the 20th century, was a tough juggle for an individual. And I'm sure there's been a lot of change to even make it even harder for some today. Because going back into my high school days, there was a point in time where coaches could not put year-round work in with their high school programs. Today, it's almost expected, and if you're not doing it, you're falling behind. How have you been able to make the adjustments to be able to sustain the success you've had?
I think, first of all, I think you have to change with the times, and people change. And everybody says kids have changed so much in the years, and there have been a lot of changes. And one of the unfortunate changes is we see a lot of single parent homes. And I think that's a big problem in our country. I think, and I'm not blaming anybody, it's just an unfortunate thing that we get a lot of single parent children. And so they're missing it at some point that. And what's been helpful to me is I've been able to adjust through the years. I've not, set to one style, let's say coaching. So let's just take coaching for a moment. I've not said, okay, this is all we're doing. I'm not going to adjust. I've always been fortunate to adjust to the talent that I've been given. The last 2 years, I was at a small school, and our tallest starter was 6'1", and we went 18-7 last year. We had to adjust how we played the game. And I think that that has a bigger translation. In life and in teaching, we have to adjust to the new things. The computer age, you and I were joking before we came on here about being digital foreigners. These children today are digital natives. One of the things I miss about teaching high school is if I had a problem with my phone, I would just get it to one of my high school students and it would be fixed. These kids are, we don't give kids enough credit today. And so for me, like I said, learning alongside of them is number one. But number two, I think really being able to adjust, going back to the original question, I think I've been able to adjust my style, adjust my teaching methods, my coaching methods to work in today's game. And I think every successful person has done that. They're willing to make adjustments. They don't get stuck in a rut and they're only doing things one way. There's multiple ways to do, many ways to be successful. And again, a lot of that is prayer, guidance, allowing the Lord to lead in your life, I think is a big part of it. And just praying for wisdom and guidance when we don't have it, because we don't have all the answers. I've never had all the answers. And I think the older I get, the more experienced I get, the more I realize how much I don't know and how much I still need to learn. So I think being motivated to learn has been a big part of my success, just continuing to learn. And I guess I have to say, coaching mentors and teaching mentors are of utmost importance. And I'm going to give a shout out. I've had some coaching mentors, Bill Patrick, longtime coach up at Whitco and Tippecanoe Valley High Schools, over 700 wins. Bill's been like a father to me. We were talking last night for an hour on my way home from Indianapolis. I called him and we just talk basketball, we talk life, we talk different things. He helps me out. Coach Basil Malby, of state championship fame and over 700 wins, has helped me a lot in my career. One of my former coaching mentors, Ed Siegel, who Pike High School Gymnasium's named after, he actually helped me as well before his passing. And he was a guy that would just step in. And so I guess I've always been, since I've had so many great helpers, I've always tried to help others who seek that. And I've, done a little mentoring myself of younger coaches, and I'm willing to do that. If anybody's watching this and has questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, because I feel that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to help each other out.
Coach, the underlying theme in that message you just presented, perfectly stated, by the way, is really that self-awareness aspect, being comfortable with self in that piece.
For sure. And I think you have to know who you are and be who you are and not try to be somebody else. And certainly early in my coaching career, as many young coaches did, you emulate famous coaches. And I remember a long time ago realizing I'm not Bobby Knight. That's not me. That's not my personality. I got to know Coach Knight. He's an amazing, and I think he gets a bad rap because a lot of times you see the negative, but he was an amazing mentor to coaches and willing to speak to anybody. I don't care if you were the third grade coach at a little private school and who knows where, Indiana, Coach Knight would have gladly spoken to you and helped you out. But he's his own person. He's going to have his own style. You've got to be aware of who you are and what works for you. And I think nothing works until you work. And I also believe that nobody is going to really care about your knowledge until they know that you care for them. And I think relationships are of utmost importance. You've got to build relationships with your students. You got to build relationships with your team. If you're in business, you got to build relationships with your workers. You can't just be the boss. And I don't think, and that was one thing I really appreciate about you, Dr. Smith, is when I didn't work for you, I worked with you. And you made that clear to the staff and faculty. And you have in many ways been a mentor to me with that piece of we're working together. And the other thing I was most probably impressed with about you was always about the kids first. And in any business, when I was in college, I got married at the age of 21. My wife was 19. We were college students. And so we were working full time, going to school full time. And I worked at Walmart. And I remember the customer was always right. In education, the customer's not always right, but you are working for the customer. You are serving the customer. You're serving them. And that's what servant leadership is all about. Let's face it. when you look at the greatest servant leader of all time, we've already mentioned his name a few times in this podcast, Jesus Christ. He came to serve, not to be served. And I think that's the example and the model for us in education and business, in life, in parenting, mentoring, whatever we do. Go to serve. And your life will be a lot more fulfilling. I don't have any regrets. I've certainly would like to have done things better at times, but knowing that my heart's in the right place makes me get up in the morning and say, hey, as John Wooden said, success is a peace of mind that is a direct result of knowing I did my best to be the very best I could be. And that's where I feel my life calling is just to be the best I can be and help those like others have helped me. I wouldn't be talking to you today as, and it's funny to hear a successful coach or a successful teacher. I never got into coaching to win X amount of games or to do this or that. I got in it to help others grow.
Coach, your message, and thank you for the kind words in representing education, the legacy of education. I feel like things have changed 40 or 50 years ago, where as a student, I heard a lot from my teachers in the classroom about the legacy as an educator, the history, the people that had come before. I wonder if we've lost sight of that just a little bit because of the busyness around us in this world today. That as an educator, when we're in the classroom, when we're on the court, there's been 200 plus years of others who've come and done this before that has provided that opportunity. And then I step back and want to ask someone like you, and I'll ask it now. You're so positive and so proud, and it comes through in a very strong and I mean that in a positively impactful manner as of being a lifelong educator. But yet we see individuals leaving the profession much earlier today or in shorter windows of time than they once did. And the availability of applicants, people coming into the field seem to be down. How do you look at that today, and how do we turn that around? How can we use the legacy if that's even a part of it?
That's a tough question. It's a great question. I was at new teacher orientation here the last 2 days, and I thought, man, here I am with all these rookies, but I'm a rookie too. I'm a rookie to this corporation. And I felt good when there was another colleague there. This was that client's or that colleague's 37th year in education. And I think we live in such a, to answer your question, live in such a satisfaction now. I need satisfaction now world that we lose sight of the bigger goal in education. And I think if I'm not making X amount of dollars, if I'm not getting this or that, I think education's in a tough spot now. Again, I think there's way too many standardized tests. I think we test these children to death. And then as a result of the standardized test, I think there's more expectations put on educators to make sure they pass this test and that test, and they're here and here. That's been tough with this new generation. These kids are very technologically savvy and driven that way. And again, going back to that change, it's hard for people to maintain that balance of having an impact, yet meeting the standards all the time. I think that's a part of it. And then I think we're told very falsely by the world that money will buy us happiness. And you can look at all the famous people in the world, whether it be athletes, movie stars, whatever it might be, musical people who are very dissatisfied with their life. And it's because they're not helping others. It's all about accumulation. And in no way will you ever be happy just accumulating things for yourself. And again, likening it to coaching, I never like to say, hey, our goal this year is to win 20 games or 15 games. Well, that'd be great if we did. But I think your goal, not only in coaching, but in life, needs to change from a destination to the journey itself, becoming. I always say, by the end of the year, I want us to become the best team we're capable of becoming. And if we do that, then we've been successful. I think too much, it's if I don't make X amount of dollars a year with this job, then I need to find a new job. We're a different generation, and you and I are old enough to know that our parents and their parents, particularly as I think Tom Brokaw called them, the greatest generation. My grandfather was 17 years old, lied about his age, storming the beaches of Normandy, for crying out loud. How many 30 or 25-year-old men would you find willing to give up everything to protect their country? There's just this whole selfish, we've lost track of what selflessness was. And we could all on this, whoever's listening to this podcast could think of a grandparent who's just so unselfish and so giving and so kind. I think of my own grandfather who passed away, 15 years ago or so, who was just such a selfless man. He was a barber. He cut hair in Toledo, Ohio, and loved what he did because he got to interact with people. And the man read his Bible daily for hours. And I'll never forget Grandpa this. I did his eulogy. I was asked to do his eulogy. And of course, when you're 98 years old, you don't have a lot of friends left. And so for those who were there, I was looking to find some things out about Grandpa. And so I was talking to people at the visitation, and one older gentleman who I thought looked about as old as my grandfather came up to me, was dragging an oxygen tank with him. And he said, "Are you related to Mr. Busick?" And I said, "Yeah, he's my grandfather." So I got a story about him. And this story just rings true to that generation that my grandfather grew up in. Grandpa was a barber during the Depression, and times were tough. And he was there in Toledo, Ohio, and he ended up, I guess it's post-Depression, but there was this man that I was talking to. His mother had passed away, and his father had passed away, leaving his mother. Back then, women really didn't work much, and leaving her with these two boys she had to raise. He said he always had longer hair because he couldn't afford haircuts. And his mom would give him, I think back then he said haircuts were a dime or something. So a dime each. So you should give him 2 dimes for a haircut. And this is Grandpa's generation. So Grandpa had cut his hair and cut the little boy's hair, and he'd take the 2 dimes, and Grandpa would say, "Here's your change." And the man told me Grandpa always gave him a quarter for change. That kind of selflessness, that sacrifice, that putting others before yourself. I remember when I was a little boy in a Sunday school class, somebody said the way to find joy in your life is to use the letters of joy as an acronym: Jesus, others, yourself. And I think if you do that, happiness is sure to follow. And Grandpa was a great example, as was his entire generation, of selfless service to your country, selfless service to your neighbors, loving your neighbors as yourself, as the Bible teaches. And I think we need to get back to that. I think we need to find those authentic people. And I fall short. I wish I were. I wish I were like my grandfather, but it's so hard to live up to. But that legacy, I think once we find a bunch of, and I believe they're there. I believe there's a lot of young people who are ready to make a great impact for this world. And they're out there. I've seen them. I've had them in class. They want to be selfless. They want to sacrifice. And I think once that becomes popular in our pop culture, the world could be turned upside down, no question, once we find selfless leaders. And I think, to me, that's a big thing. I think we need to find selfless leadership, and we need to find young people willing to do that. And that's one of my jobs as an educator, is to sell to my students that selflessness equals happiness, not money.
Said, Coach, many of us, I included, do fall short of that legacy. But I think it's fantastic that the legacy remains, and we need to talk more about those examples as you've shared. Thank you for sharing that with your grandfather and your story. And I think it's a wonderful challenge for all of us. And I love the positivity that you bring and you have, not only for the field of education, but for where the future lies, that our youth today, the younger generations, the newer generations, they're there. Those selfless people are there in that piece. And hopefully for our viewers and listeners with this podcast, you're having an opportunity to pick out something that you can use to add to your leadership toolbox, your serving toolbox, your servant toolbox in that regard. Coach, thank you so much. We're going to wrap episode 1, and we're going to come right back and talk in episode 2 and build from where we are. But thank you so much. I love the passion. And I love you, my brother, but just thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
And I hope, again, that you have found something from Coach Shaun Busick. What is what you get? He's been consistent, just as you've seen during this episode, with his love for others, his love for Christ, and his love to give and serve others for the 3 years I've known him each and every day. Just remember, leadership is about serving. Leadership is about serving self and serving others to bring value to a greater part of your world to the highest level that you possibly can. I'm Kevin Smith for Coach Shaun Busick. Thank you for listening, for watching, and stay tuned next week when Coach Busick joins us again for another episode of Leadership Synergized. I appreciate you and all you do.